Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and we've been asking the question, what is going to be the relationship now between the United States and Israel under the Biden administration? Well, very timely and always an honor to have with us Laurie Cardoza Moore. She's the founder and the president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nation. And you can go to pjtn.org as her website, and frontline warrior doing some great work, and be a part of what she does and support her. pjtn.org. Hi, Laurie. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm trying to scratch my head on where we are. I stand to be corrected, but it doesn't look like President Biden has called Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yet. Do you know?
I have not heard anything. I know that the Prime Minister of Israel has reached out to Biden on a couple of occasions since November 3rd. So, no, I haven't heard any word, but I don't know if there's any plans in the future either to go and visit Israel in his new capacity. So I guess we will both just have to scratch our heads, wait and see.
So what do you think is going to happen now with the relationship between the United States and Israel?
Perry, I think it's going to be a very disturbing time, and I think the Israelis knew this. If President Trump did not win re-election, they've been preparing for this. We have seen some of the appointments and some of the initiatives that were taken apparently immediately after Biden was inaugurated. They changed the embassy website to the U.S. Embassy to Israel and included Gaza and the Palestinian Authority. So we've included a terrorist group with our embassy in Israel, and then somebody immediately pulled it down. Not sure what happened there. But if we look at the statements that have been made by the President Biden and the Biden administration, that they are going to renew relations with Iran. It's very frightening. Iran immediately came out and talked about how they were going to continue to develop their nuclear weapons. So I think it's very clear. You know, personally, I think we're moving into the last days, excuse me, and we see, I believe that all the nations of the world will again turn on Israel. It's frightening, actually.
The three peace deals, Abraham peace agreement and others that the Trump administration put together, which kind of isolated Iran from all of that.
Right.
Do you think they will hold together and force Biden not to go through with Iran, or do you think you see them falling apart?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that he is going to reverse course. I do believe that we are going to see normalized relations with Iran in an unprecedented manner. And of course, this is all to appease everyone, but because of the Abraham Accords and all the relationships that President Trump, in fact, I was just reading briefly this morning about Morocco the UAE offering the highest honor to President Trump for his work that he did. You know, the Saudis have been supportive of the work that he did do in the Middle East as it pertains to Israel. So we're going to have to wait and see how things play out, but it certainly is a disturbing trend that we see.
Do you think there's a remote possibility he would move the embassy back out of Jerusalem?
There's not been any communication stating such, but I would not be a bit surprised that he would do that at some point. They're not going to do it right now. They're going to wait and give it some time. And then when they start the whole process of that whole relationship with the Palestinian Authority and normalizing relations once again, I think that's probably going to be back on the table. The Palestinian Authority is probably going to declare it, or the Palestinian Authority is going to demand that they are recognized in Jerusalem as well as their capital city.
So, Laurie, where does this leave Saudi Arabia and Egypt?
Well, it puts them in a very precarious situation, because how's their relationship with the Biden administration going to pan out? because they've accepted these new relations that President Trump implemented with these different countries, Muslim countries. So I'm not sure. I can't predict what is going to unfold, but I think that these Muslim countries understand that any relationship with Iran is not good for them. So we'll have to, again, wait and see how that plays out. But I think that's a factor that we have to weigh into or consider in the upcoming administration and their policies in the Middle East.
You and I have discussed quite a few times the rise of anti-Semitism across the country and raising its ugly head again. But if we're going to, under this administration, neutralize Israel again, then I don't see any pushback on this anti-Semitism. I hope I'm wrong, but how do you see it?
No, in fact, Perry, you are spot on. We do believe that this is going to continue to fuel more anti-Semitism. I was looking at Congressman McKinney's video presentation that she had done. She was interviewed by a bunch of white supremacists and KKK members, which I thought was shocking that they would have her on, being a woman of color. But she was talking about the Zionists, the Jews, and how they're behind all of the problems. We see, it's interesting because, Perry, every time the world starts turning against Israel, we see the same narrative. We see the comments that we see in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which was deemed a fraudulent piece of propaganda. It started in France, and it actually happened to be a civic judge in Russia who deemed that it was not legit, that it was falsified information. But unfortunately, we have people who are blaming the Jews for everything that is happening around the world. And of course, it makes people who don't know what's going on, especially, our concern is Christians, because biblically we have to stand on what God's word is. And unfortunately, Christians fall prey, and I hear it on a lot of the talking head shows. These groups that are conservative, supposed Christian, are promoting an anti-Semitic narrative, blaming the Jews. We've seen it on several Christian media outlets, and it's frightening to say the least, but we're reminded in God's word, Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you. And even in the book of Obadiah, which I will quote often, God told the prophet Obadiah that he was going to wipe out the descendants of Edom because they stood by while their brother Jacob was held in captivity and they did nothing. Well, if we look back to the Holocaust, we just celebrated the International Holocaust Remembrance Day last week. If we look back even to the Holocaust and we see how Christians stood by, we asked the question, in fact, in my documentary, The Forgotten People, Christianity and the Holocaust, I asked the question, if this could happen in Germany at the time that Hitler came to power, that the Nazis took over the Reichstag, if that could happen in Germany, where Jews could be singled out and murdered, 6 million, and then another 5.5 million other people, a country that was Judeo-Christian, because there were Jews and Christians in Germany. Germany gave us the rise of the Reformation movement. The Protestant faith was birthed out of Germany. It was an educated country. It was a country that people would send their children from all over Europe to their universities to be educated because they were so well respected. So I asked the question, if that could happen in an educated Judeo-Christian nation, can it happen in the United States of America? And Perry, look at what we're witnessing.
Yeah. Boy, you're hitting on all cylinders. As you know, one of the arguments today is insightful speech or hate speech, and we're going to see the president be brought up on those charges this week. But in the meantime, you'll see very liberal representatives go to the House floor and say that Israel is a terrorist state and not be seen as insightful rhetoric. And I don't expect that to slow down. But if they want to call Israel a terrorist state, where does that leave us?
Well, look at what they're calling people of faith, people of the book, people who believe the Bible. We're too being lumped in that category. It's frightening, to say the least. And it's more important than ever that we, as Jews and Christians, people of faith, stand up and hold our elected leaders accountable. We cannot sit back and allow this to happen. God has put this, He has brought us into this generation. This is all unfolding on our watch. We have to ask ourselves.
I watched something over the weekend, and I won't give all the credits to it, but I want to ask you this question, and more on the spiritual side. But when somebody lays their hand on the Bible to take an oath, and the Bible then, I'm assuming, becomes the standard of that oath, and then they govern against that oath and their hand on the Bible, and mocking God, at what point does he step in?
Yeah. Well, I've been having this conversation with many within our organization and even my family. When do we step in? And I think there's a great story in the book of Daniel when Daniel was forced to worship their God. I just remind ourselves we have to plead with our elected officials, especially those of faith, to stand up. Unfortunately, I think a lot of Americans feel right now disenfranchised. Do their elected officials even listen to them anymore? And it's very disturbing, to say the least. But Perry, we have a responsibility. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who, as we all know, was murdered by the Nazis 4 days before the Allied forces liberated the concentration camps and liberated Europe. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer quoted that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And I think that those words are going to ring true to every person of faith, whether you're a Jew or whether you're Christian. That is the reality of the world we live in. We must decide if we will tolerate these leaders. This government is a government of we the people, and it is time that we the people start executing our rights as the republic who appoints or votes to put these people in office. They have to be removed. They do not represent the Judeo-Christian values. In fact, Perry, I've been involved in reviewing textbooks, and we just received a new set of Pearson published textbooks. Curriculum we are reviewing. It is frightening to see the content that Jews, even as it pertains to Jews, in one textbook, I was informed by our senior academic fellow that Jews are completely written out of U.S. history. The only value that the Jews brought to the United States of America historically were bagels. There's no talk about how the Jews went before George Washington and asked him about their freedom after the American Revolution, and he assured them they would always find a safe place to sit under their vine or fig tree. They would be secure in this country. Nowhere in the book is Haim Solomon mentioned, because Haim Solomon, a wealthy Jewish banker, died without a dime to his name because he gave everything that he had to Washington to fight the revolution. He saw the value of it. We have a Jewish banker, wealthy banker, to thank for this country. Most Christians, most Americans have no clue that that is even true. There were 1,500 Jews who fought in the American Revolution. So there is a long history, but we are writing Jews out of that history, and that's why our reviewing of the textbooks, like what's happening in California, is critically important, and it's why your listeners, parents, citizens of your counties must get involved. The future of our republic hangs in the balance. It hangs on these children who are our next generation. Will we tolerate the propaganda that teachers, educators are filling our children's heads with? or will we pull our children out of the public school system and homeschool them to give them a proper education? All of our history, not selective edits to what some person or group of individuals thinks should be taught to our children.
Wow, that is powerful. Let me take a break. We come back. I know you're very passionate about what's happening, and you have a campaign going, Take Back American Children. And there's a great argument today of opening the schools, but it looks like the unions want to keep the schools closed. I want to get your take on that. Check out Laurie's website. PJTN stands for Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, pjtn.org. Very, very resourceful, and support what she does. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and very timely for us to have back with us our good friend Laurie Cardoza Moore. She is the president and the founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. PJTN is her website, pjtn.org. Very, very resourceful. You'll learn a lot there, and let me encourage you to go there and support what she's doing. Laurie, my brain's on tilt from our last conversation because it's so true. And if academia is scrubbing Jewish history from America, I would have to assume right behind that's going to be the Christian history of America. And if you look at what's not being taught in American schools as it relates to the true American history, it only leads you to believe we are very close of losing that part of our history as well, or at least being passed on to our children. This is extremely alarming. Then here comes COVID. Got all the schools shut down. There isn't one bit of evidence. In fact, the contrary of their so-called science, which is the new god of the left, that suggests sending kids back to school is the right thing to do, and we're not doing it. The combination of those two, we could be watching 2 or 3 years of education thrown under the bus that may never be recovered. What's your thought?
Yeah, well, you bring up a very good point, Perry, and all we have to do is look to states like South Dakota, like Florida. Governor DeSantis, he has made it mandatory that the schools open up. The kids have got to get back in the classroom. And life as we know it here in Florida is really back to normal for the most part, other than, seeing people wearing masks and what have you. But it's very disturbing, Perry, because something that we have to consider is the very point that you made. If they are rewriting Jewish history and its relationship to the United States of America, they will next, and we're already seeing it, rewrite Christian history as well. If we look back, Perry, to what has transpired over the last 10, 20 years, look at how in the Middle East, especially with the United Nations, I've been on this show numerous times. We've talked about some of the initiatives by the UN to totally blot out Israel from any historical evidence. We see the fact that, like the Temple Mount is not referred to by the United Nations as where the two temples, Jewish temples, once stood. They refer to the Temple Mount with an Arabic name instead of its Hebrew name. So we see this happening, and then we see the United States history being rewritten. This is connected. This is not just happening in a vacuum. There is an intention to remove the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's what these people hate. The Bible talks about, the prophets foretold about the two witnesses who will testify of the one true God in the streets of Jerusalem. I would suggest to you, Perry, those two witnesses in Jerusalem happen to be Jews and Christians. And unfortunately, because our God doesn't fit their narrative and they want to worship whatever God they want or they choose, they've totally changed history, and they're continuing to do that. It's why we have been involved in state departments of education, reviewing civics content, reviewing history, geography, and social studies textbooks. And I will tell you, Perry, there are great state legislatures, great departments of education, though few and far between. But there are those who understand what is at stake, and they are trying to hold the line and bring back into curriculum. And that's why our job at PJTN is so critically important. We review the content of the textbooks and the instructional materials. We submit our findings to the state legislature as well as departments of education. Some people will take, some of those elected officials will heed the information and they'll make the changes. We saw that in Tennessee, thank God. But other states as well are in the process. We have to target the Department of Education in these states as well as the National Education Association. All of this, didn't just happen again in a vacuum. This has been intentional. This has been planned. It's why I have repeatedly told parents and citizens that we have to get engaged in local politics. It is the key to taking back our country. The only firewall we have against an encroaching federal bureaucracy who wants to steal our rights from us, our freedoms, is our firewall, and that is our state legislature. And it is up to our state legislature to uphold the Constitution that, as you mentioned earlier, swore by oath to uphold. Unfortunately, some of those people don't consider that oath an important oath. They just say what they need to say in order to go through the process. But we, the people, again, Perry, it comes back to us. If our generation doesn't take a stand, doesn't draw a line in the sand and say, not on my watch, parents can either opt to pull their kids out of school. We saw it in Broward County, Florida this past fall, where I think it was 3.5% of children did not enlist in the public school system. Largest drop in years. And to me, that said something very profound. We have been working throughout the state of Florida, county by county. Broward County is a county I spent a lot of time in, showing parents, showing tax-paying citizens, look at what they are teaching our children. Look at the omissions that they are leaving out of our history. This is so important because if we don't understand and we don't teach a proper perspective of history, we will have chaos in the streets. And Perry, I have been saying this for almost a decade. When we found that first Pearson published textbook, Pearson Publishers, a textbook publishing company that is not a US-based company, it's British-based. Its shareholders include the governments of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Libya, and Turkey. These are the shareholders, the main shareholders for this publishing company. Should we be surprised that our history is being changed right before our eyes? And this is what we're teaching our children. It is very disturbing what we are witnessing. And if we, and all the people in your listening audience, we are starting a new initiative in California. We're mobilizing our PJTN Watchmen. If you have any listeners there, or if your listeners are in Colorado or Oregon or wherever they are, if parents and citizens want to engage and take back local control of their country, we have to start with the school boards. We have to start with education because they hold the keys to the future, our children's minds. And I can't do it without you. I can't come and fight the battle in your county because I don't have skin in the game, but you can. And that's why PJTN is here. We're here to help you, to equip you so that you can take on this challenge and you can take back local control of your county, your city, your mayor, and your state legislature.
Yeah, the old saying is all politics is local, so check it out. PJTN.org is where you'll find a lot of information that Laurie is mentioning, and working with her and her organization, who's already blazed the trail in so many ways for what we're talking about here, PJTN.org. Laurie, there's one thing that has popped up, and what brought it to mind to me was when Amy Coney Barrett was being before the U.S. Senate for her confirmation to the Supreme Court. There was about a half-a-day discussion on the term called precedence. And when I began to look into this, I realized there's the loophole in the law. If you can modify the law long enough, it sets a precedence that becomes law. That's the loophole that the left is using like crazy. We are now in a constitutional crisis in the state of Oregon. because our governor is operating under an emergency extension by the Supreme Court of Oregon, not through the legislature. And it's not being challenged, therefore it's setting a precedent. Well, if you move that over into education, look what we got.
Yeah.
Am I right or wrong on that one?
No, you're absolutely right, Perry. And that's why, again, it's up to we the people. Our founders never established this constitutional republic so that we could hire career politicians at the voting booth that could stay in there forever and then implement policies that are diametrically opposed to our values. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to get into that arena. But Perry, God has given us this responsibility. To whom much is given, much will be required. We cannot sit back and be silent. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us, we have to run for office, and we have to assist one another in when we find out somebody who we believe is a person of faith, whether Jewish or Christian, a person of faith who is committed to upholding the Republic of the United States of America, our freedoms, what the framers of our Constitution envisioned and laid out for us. If there are people in our community who are willing to do that, then we need to back them up, because the one thing these liberals don't have that we have are the grassroots. Yeah. We have boots on the ground. They may have a lot of money, but we have the people. And I will tell you, after what Tennessee witnessed in the whole debacle on January 6th, people are upset. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah, there you go.
That's not going to happen. And I sense, as I'm reading and listening to other podcasts and reading articles from others who are like-minded, Jews and Christians who are uniting together to take back this country, they're saying the same thing. It's time to take back. It's time. I know groups that are starting to mobilize in their counties, their county election commissions, because we also are in a crisis, an electoral crisis, where Americans no longer feel like their vote is being considered or counted.
You realize what you just said probably will get us censored today on YouTube and Facebook, but that's okay. All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out Laurie's website, pjtn.org, pjtn.org. A lot of what we're talking about today there is in mass form, and you can get a lot of information and support her. PJTN. Thank you, Laurie. God bless you, my friend.
God bless, Perry. Keep up the great work.
You too. See you later.